This is a life in which you have as much positive emotion as you possibly can and the skills to amplify it. The second is a life of engagement, a life in your work, your parenting, your love, your leisure. Time stops for you. That's what Aristotle was talking about. And third, the meaningful life. So I want to say a little bit about each of those lives and what we know about them. The first life is the pleasant life. And it's simply, as best we can find it, it's having as many of the pleasures as you can, as much positive emotion as you can, and learning the skills, savoring mindfulness, that amplify them, that stretch them over time and space. But the pleasant life has three drawbacks, and it's why positive psychology is not happyology, and why it doesn't end here. The first drawback is that it turns out the pleasant life, your experience of positive emotion, is heritable, about 50% heritable, and in fact, not very modifiable. So the different tricks that Mathieu and I and others know about increasing the amount of positive emotion in your life are 15 to 20% tricks, getting more of it. Second is that positive emotion habituates. It habituates rapidly, indeed. It's all like French vanilla ice cream. The first taste is 100%. By the time you're down to the sixth taste, it's gone. And as I said, it's not particularly malleable. And this leads to the second life. And I have to tell you about my friend Len to talk about why positive psychology is more than positive emotion, more than building pleasure. In two of the three great arenas of life, by the time Len was 30, Len was enormously successful. The first arena was work. By the time he was 20, he's an options trader. By the time he was 25, he was a multimillionaire and the head of an options trading company. Second, in play, he's a national champion bridge player. And, but in the third great arena of life, love, Len is an abysmal failure. And the reason he was that Len is a cold fish. Len is an introvert. American women said to Len when he dated them, "You're no fun. You don't have positive emotion. Get lost." And Len was wealthy enough to be able to afford a Park Avenue psychoanalyst who for 5 years tried to find the sexual trauma that had somehow locked positive emotion inside of him. But it turned out there wasn't any sexual trauma. It turned out that Len grew up in Long Island and he played football and watched football and played bridge. Len is in the bottom 5% of what we call positive affectivity. So the question is Len unhappy? And I want to say not. Contrary to what psychology told us about the bottom 50% of the human race in positive affectivity, I think Len is one of the happiest people I know. He's not consigned to the hell of unhappiness, and that's because Len, like most of you, is enormously capable of flow. When he walks onto the floor of the American Exchange at 9:30 in the morning, time stops for him, and it stops till the closing bell. When the first card is played, till 10 days later, the tournament is over, time stops for Len. And this is indeed what Mike Csikszentmihalyi has been talking about flow, and it's distinct from pleasure in a very important way. Pleasure has raw feels. You know it's happening. It's thought and feeling. But what Mike told you yesterday, during flow, you can't feel anything. You're one with the music. Time stops. You have intense concentration. And this is indeed the characteristic of what we think of as the good life. And we think there's a recipe for it, and it's knowing what your highest strengths are. And again, there's a valid test of what your 5 highest strengths are, and then recrafting your life to use them as much as you possibly can. Recrafting your work, your love, your play, your friendship, your parenting. Just one example. One person I worked with was a bagger at Gennardi's. Hated the job. She's working her way through college. Her highest strength was social intelligence. So she recrafted bagging to make the encounter with her the social highlight of every customer's day. Now, obviously she failed, but what she did was to take her highest strengths and recraft work to use them as much as possible. What you get out of that is not smiliness. You don't look like Debbie Reynolds, you don't giggle a lot. What you get is more absorption. So that's the second path. The first path, positive emotion. The second path is eudaimonia and flow. And the third path is meaning. This is the most venerable of all the happinesses traditionally. And meaning in this view consists of, very parallel to eudaimonia, it consists of knowing what your highest strengths are and using them to belong to and in the service of something larger than you are. Well, I mentioned that for all three kinds of lives, the pleasant life, the good life, the meaningful life, people are now hard at work on the question, are there things that lastingly change those lives? And the answer seems to be yes, and I'll just give you some samples of it. It's being done in a rigorous manner. It's being done in the same way that we test drugs to see what really works. So we do random assignment, placebo-controlled, long-term studies of different interventions. And just to sample the kind of interventions that we find have an effect. When we teach people about the pleasant life, how to have more pleasure in your life, one of your assignments is to take the mindfulness skills, the savoring skills, and you're assigned to design a beautiful day. Next Saturday, set a day aside, design yourself a beautiful day, and use savoring and mindfulness to enhance those pleasures. And we can show in that way that the pleasant life is enhanced. Gratitude visit. I want you all to do this with me now, if you would. Close your eyes. I'd like you to remember someone who did something enormously important that changed your life in the good direction, who you never properly thanked. The person has to be alive. Okay? Now, okay, you can open your eyes. I hope all of you have such a person. Your assignment, when you're learning the gratitude visit, is to write a 300-word testimonial to that person, call them on the phone in Phoenix, ask if you can visit, don't tell them why, show up at their door, you read the testimonial. Everyone weeps when this happens. And what happens is when we test people 1 week later, a month later, 3 months later, they're both happier and less depressed. Another example is a strengths date in which we get couples to identify their highest strengths on the strengths test and then to design an evening in which they both use their strengths. And we find this is a strengthener of relationships. And fun versus philanthropy, but it's so heartening to be in a group like this in which so many of you have turned your lives to philanthropy. Well, my undergraduates and the people I work with haven't discovered this, so we actually have people do something altruistic and do something fun, and to contrast it. And what you find is when you do something fun, it has a square wave walk set. When you do something philanthropic to help another person, it lasts, and it lasts.